2:31 a.m. The Arabian Sea, 163 nautical miles southeast of the Strait of Hormuz. The surface temperature is 29 degrees Celsius, warm even at this hour. The sea glassy and black under a moonless sky. At depth, 60 meters, 80 meters, 100 meters, the water is layered in thermal gradients that bend sound, scatter sonar pulses, and create acoustic shadow zones that submarine commanders pray for, and anti-submarine warfare officers spend careers learning to defeat. It is an environment that rewards patience, silence, and the kind of operational discipline that takes decades to build. It is, in short, ideal submarine country. The USS Nimitz, CVN-68, the lead ship of her class, the oldest nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in the United States Navy, and still one of the most capable warships ever built, holds course at 14 knots on a southerly heading, her 2 nuclear reactors running at 40% power, her hull cutting smoothly through the glass-flat Arabian Sea. She is the center of Carrier Strike Group 11, on deployment in support of U.S. Fifth Fleet operations. Around her, the Ticonderoga-class cruiser USS Princeton, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers USS Shoup, USS Chaffee, and USS Pinckney, and positioned ahead into the flanks of the formation, invisible and lethal, 2 Los Angeles-class fast attack submarines, USS Pasadena and USS Jefferson City, running at battle quiet at 150 feet, their TB-29A thin-line towed arrays streaming hundreds of feet behind them in the warm Arabian Sea water, listening. The Iranian Navy's submarine force is not large. It consists of 3 Kilo-class conventional submarines acquired from Russia in the 1990s, the Tariq, the Noor, and the Yunus, and a larger number of domestically built Ghadir and Fateh-class midget submarines, smaller vessels optimized for littoral operations in the shallow waters of the Persian Gulf. The Kilo-class boats are the serious ones. Project 877 EKM, NATO designation Kilo, Russian designation Varshavyanka, the Black Hole submarine, so named by NATO for its exceptionally low acoustic signature when running on battery power at slow speeds in diesel-electric mode. At 3 knots, a Kilo-class submarine is one of the quietest conventional submarines in the world. It is not silent, but in the acoustic environment of the Arabian Sea, biological noise, commercial shipping lanes, the constant background rumble of the Gulf's maritime traffic, it is very, very difficult to find. The Iranian planners had spent 18 months preparing this operation. They had studied American Carrier Strike Group ASW protocols with the obsessive attention of people who understood that the margin for error was 0. They knew that American carrier strike groups maintain a persistent organic ASW barrier. The 2 fast attack submarines ahead of the formation, the SH-60R Seahawk helicopters dipping their AN/AQS-22 ALFS sonar systems at intervals throughout the formation's path, the P-8A Poseidon Maritime Patrol aircraft maintaining barrier patrols at altitude with its AN/A PY-10 radar and sonobuoy dispensers. They knew the geometry of the barrier. They knew the intervals. They believed they had found a seam. The seam was a thermal layer. The Arabian Sea in this season produces a pronounced thermocline at approximately 60 to 70 meters depth. A sharp temperature boundary that reflects and refracts sound in ways that can create a significant acoustic shadow below the layer for sonar systems operating above it. The Iranian submarine Tariq had been operating below the thermocline at 75 meters at 3 knots on battery power for 11 hours. Her crew of 52 had maintained near total silence, no cooking, No unnecessary movement, no non-essential systems. They had eaten cold rations and communicated in whispers. The commanding officer, a veteran officer with 22 years in the submarine service, had briefed his crew before departure from Bandar Abbas. This is not an exercise. This is the culmination of 2 years of planning. We will not fail. They were carrying 4 SET-65E heavyweight torpedoes, wire-guided, active/passive acoustic homing, 400-kilogram torp warhead, maximum range 19 kilometers at 45 knots, and they were carrying 2 EM-52 rocket-propelled naval mines designed to be launched from torpedo tubes and position themselves on the seafloor at a pre-programmed location, rising to detonate when a ship's acoustic or magnetic signature triggers the fuse. The mines were the secondary weapon, a delayed trap for any rescue or recovery operations following the torpedo attack. The torpedoes were the primary instrument of what they intended to be the most devastating attack on an American warship since 1987. At 2:31 a.m., the Tariq was at 41 nautical miles from the Nimitz. She had been closing at 3 knots for 11 hours, navigating by inertial system to avoid any electronic emissions that might betray her position. The commanding officer had computed his firing solution 3 hours earlier and had been refining it continuously using passive acoustic detection of the carrier strike group's propulsion noise. At 41 miles, on battery power, making 3 knots, the Tariq was, in the assessment of her commanding officer, inside the acoustic detection range of the American ASW barrier and completely undetected. He made 5 catastrophic mistakes, and the first of them was made 18 months before the Tariq ever left Bandar Abbas. The first mistake was the seam. The thermal layer that the Iranian planners had identified and relied upon as the central operational assumption of the entire mission had been identified by the same oceanographic analysis process that American P-8A crews and submarine commanders used to plan ASW operations. The thermocline at 60 to 70 meters in this area, in this season, at these water temperatures, was not an American blind spot. It was a known feature of the acoustic environment, accounted for in the ASW barrier geometry, specifically addressed by the employment of the SH-60RA-LFS sonar system, whose AN/AQS 22 low-frequency active/passive sonar is designed to project and receive acoustic energy across thermocline boundaries. The Iranians had studied the thermocline. The Americans had studied it longer. The second mistake was speed and time. 11 hours at 3 knots, covering 33 nautical miles from the initial datum point, meant the Tariq had been in the water and moving for long enough for her battery discharge rate to have altered the subtle electromagnetic signature she presented to the water around her. A Kilo-class submarine running on batteries at low speed produces a very small but detectable electromagnetic field from her propulsion motor windings. The USS Jefferson City, running her AN/BQQ-10 sonar system in passive mode ahead of the formation's starboard quarter, had been logging an intermittent low-frequency contact bearing 278 for the last 4 hours. Too faint to classify, too persistent to dismiss. A contact that the submarine's sonar supervisor had designated as POSSUB, possible submarine, and was tracking with growing confidence. The third mistake was the mines. The EM-52 rocket-propelled mine, when pre-programmed and launched from a torpedo tube, produces a distinct acoustic signature during its launch transient. A low-frequency pressure pulse generated by the launch impulse and the water ram as the mine exits the tube and begins its transit to its designated deployment position. The launch transient is brief, 2 to 3 seconds and is buried in the ambient noise environment at any significant range. At 41 nautical miles, it would be inaudible to the USS Jefferson City. But the Tariq was not 41 nautical miles from everything. She was 41 nautical miles from the Nimitz. She was 11 nautical miles from a sonobuoy field that the P-8A Poseidon, assigned to the strike group's ASW screen, had dropped 4 hours earlier on the bearing of a faint biological contact that had since resolved into a whale. The sonobuoys were passive, listening, and they were exactly on the acoustic bearing that the mine-launched transient, when it came, would travel. The fourth mistake: the wire-guided torpedo. The SET-65E torpedo is wire-guided for the first phase of its run. The operator aboard the submarine controls its course via a thin copper wire that pays out from both the torpedo and the submarine simultaneously. Wire guidance means the submarine must maintain a steady course and speed during the guidance phase to prevent wire breakage. A Kilo-class submarine maintaining course and steady speed at 3 knots, even below the thermocline, is a different acoustic target than one that is actively maneuvering. The steadiness of the contact, no course changes, no speed changes, perfectly predictable movement, is itself a signature. Marine biologics and inanimate contacts meander. A submarine on a firing solution holds steady. The USS Jefferson City's sonar supervisor, watching POSIB Bear 278 maintain an absolutely consistent track for 40 minutes, upgraded his classification to ProbSub, probable submarine, at 2:28 a.m. and transmitted the datum to the formation commander. The fifth mistake was the most fundamental and the most human. The Tariq's commanding officer had computed his firing solution based on the Nimitz's observed course and speed, as detected by passive acoustic tracking over the previous 11 hours. He had not accounted for the fact that the Nimitz had altered course 6 degrees to the south 47 minutes earlier, a routine navigation adjustment to maintain her operating area, and that this 6-degree course change, propagated over 41 miles of torpedo run time, moved his predicted intercept point 4 nautical miles from the carrier's actual position. His firing solution was built on an outdated track. The torpedo would miss. It would miss by 4 miles, and it would miss because the commanding officer, focused entirely on his approach geometry and his crew's acoustic discipline, had not processed the subtle shift in the bearing rate of the carrier's propulsion noise that would have told him the Nimitz had turned. At 2:33 a.m., 2 minutes after ProbSub was reported, the USS Jefferson City receives the formation commander's authorization. She is 11 nautical miles from the contact bearing. She increases speed to 5 knots and begins her approach, launching a full pattern of AN/SSQ-125 active sonobuoys from her signal ejector to sanitize the water column between herself and the ProbSub datum. The sonobuoys activate. Their active pings propagate through the water column, crossing the thermocline, bouncing off the seafloor. At 2:34 a.m. and 17 seconds, the third sonobuoy in the pattern gets a return. Hard. Close. 1.7 nautical miles from the contact datum, bearing 269 at 73 meters depth. A Kilo-class submarine. Unambiguous. The acoustic return has the hull form factor, the blade rate frequency, and the propulsion noise profile of a Project 877 EKM submarine at low speed. The contact is classified Submerged Contact Sierra 1. Hostile. The USS Jefferson City has her. The Tariq's sonar operator hears the active pings at 2:34 a.m. and knows immediately what they mean. He reports to the commanding officer in a single word. The commanding officer looks at his tactical display at the bearing of the pings, at the geometry of his approach, and makes the only decision available to him. Emergency surface. Rig for surface. Launch countermeasures. The Tariq fires 2 MG-74 torpedo decoys from her signal ejectors, devices that generate bubble clouds and acoustic noise designed to seduce homing torpedoes away from the submarine, and simultaneously blows her ballast tanks, beginning an emergency ascent. She increases speed to maximum battery output, 6 knots, and begins a radical course change to the northwest, putting her stern toward the contact bearing, racing for the surface and the communications antenna that would allow her to transmit the abort signal to Bandar Abbas. She does not reach it in time to prevent the engagement. She reaches it in time to prevent her own destruction, because the USS Jefferson City's commanding officer, operating under the rules of engagement applicable to a submarine contact that has conducted an unauthorized approach to within weapons range of an American carrier strike group in international waters, has 2 options: fire or demand surface identification. He demands surface identification first. It is the correct decision. It is also the decision that the Tariq's emergency surface evolution makes possible. The Tariq broaches the surface at 2:36 a.m., 17 nautical miles from the Nimitz, her sail breaking the water at a 20-degree angle from her emergency ascent. Her commanding officer activates her identification transponder. The signal is received by every Aegis system in the formation simultaneously. Iranian Navy. Submarine. Kilo-class. The formation commander's voice on the radio is the voice of a man who has made a decision and is not going to revisit it. All units, this is Strike Group. Sierra 1 has surfaced and identified. She is in custody. Nimitz, alter course immediately. Nimitz, escort, close Sierra 1. Jefferson City, maintain contact. All other units hold position. This is a live hostile contact. Do not take hostile action unless fired upon. The USS Shoop closes to 2,000 meters of the surfaced Tariq. Her deck guns are manned. Her helicopters are airborne. The Tariq sits on the surface, her crew below decks, her commanding officer standing in the open bridge cockpit in the warm Arabian Sea night, looking at the gun barrel of the USS Shoop from 2,000 meters, understanding with absolute clarity that his operation has failed. At 2:41 a.m., the formation commander transmits to 5th Fleet. At 2:47 a.m., 5th Fleet transmits to CENTCOM. At 2:52 a.m., CENTCOM transmits to the National Command Authority. The diplomatic and intelligence chain of events that follows is instantaneous and global. But the military response does not wait for diplomacy. The military response begins at 2:45 a.m., when the P-8A Poseidon that detected the sonobuoy return extends its patrol pattern to cover the full operating area to a depth of 40 nautical miles, dropping additional sonobuoy barriers on every approach bearing to the strike group. The USS Pasadena, which had been operating ahead of the formation, reverses course and begins a coordinated barrier sweep with the Jefferson City to sanitize the water to the northwest, the Tariq's approach corridor, to confirm that she was alone. She was not alone. At 3:04 a.m., the Pasadena's TB-29A thin-line towed array detects a second contact, bearing 315, speed 2 knots, depth estimated at 80 meters. The acoustic profile is different from the Kilo, slightly higher blade rate frequency, different machinery noise spectrum. The Pasadena's sonar team classifies it in 8 minutes of careful analysis. Fateh-class submarine. Iranian. The Fateh is a domestically produced Iranian submarine, 1,300 tons submerged, capable of launching JASC-2 anti-ship cruise missiles from its torpedo tubes. Smaller than the Kilo, but potentially more dangerous in the current context. Because unlike the now-surfaced Tariq, the Fateh has not been detected, and does not know it has been detected, and is still on an approach course. PROBSUB, bearing 315, 23 nautical miles from the Nimitz's current position. The formation commander does not hesitate. Pasadena, you are authorized to engage Sierra 2 if she reaches weapons release range. Hold track. Update continuously. Jefferson City, break off Tariq custody to Shoup. Join Pasadena for prosecution. The two American submarines coordinate their approach using the Acoustic Communication System, ACOMS, an underwater telephone that allows data and voice traffic without surfacing. The USS Jefferson City crosses to the bearing 315 approach corridor and deploys her own sonobuoy pattern defense in the contact from the south. The USS Pasadena approaches from the northwest, reducing her own speed to minimize self-noise, her sonar team maintaining continuous track on Sierra 2 with growing precision. At 3:17 a.m., the Fateh-class submarine makes her first error. She increases speed to 4 knots, a slight acceleration, possibly the result of her crew detecting the sonobuoy field and attempting to close the range before the barrier becomes impassable. The speed increase raises her acoustic signature. The Pasadena gets a dramatically improved track quality. The fire control solution locks. The USS Pasadena does not fire. The Fateh has not reached weapons release range, has not made a hostile act, has not launched. The American commanding officer holds. He tracks. He waits. He documents. Every second of track data is being transmitted to the surface via buoyed communications antenna, building a forensic record of the approach. At 3:22 a.m., the Fateh begins a torpedo tube flooding sequence. The sonar signature of torpedo tube flood down, water rushing into the tubes under pressure, is distinctive and unmistakable to a trained sonar operator at this range. It is a preparatory action for weapons launch. It is, under the rules of engagement, the threshold. Pasadena, TAO. Sierra 2 is flooding tubes. You are weapons free. The Pasadena fires 2 MK-48 ADCAP heavyweight torpedoes, advanced capability, wire-guided, active/passive acoustic Hohmann, 295 kg PBXN 103 explosive warhead, range 50 km at 55 knots. The wire guidance allows the Pasadena's fire control team to drive the torpedoes directly toward the Fateh's predicted position, adjusting course in real time as the sonar picture updates. The first torpedo goes active, activates its own sonar. At 3 kilometers from the predicted intercept point, it acquires immediately. The Fateh's crew hears the active sonar pings. They launch countermeasures. 2 torpedo decoys from their signal ejectors. The first MK-48 is seduced away from the Fateh by the decoy cloud. It hunts. It reacquires. It reacquires the decoy. It detonates against the decoy at 200 meters from the Fateh's hull. The explosion is large. The pressure wave stuns the Fateh's hull, damages her diving planes, kills her propulsion for 40 seconds as circuit breakers trip throughout the boat. The second MK-48 has been tracking the Fateh's hull form directly, ignoring the decoys because its guidance wire has been feeding it course corrections that keep it on the actual hull bearing rather than the decoy cloud bearing. It closes. It goes active at 1 kilometer. It acquires the Fateh at 600 meters. The Fateh's crew has 41 seconds. They attempt a crash dive, pushing the damaged diving planes to their stops. The boat responds sluggishly. The stern drops. The bow rises. The second MK-48 detonates under the keel at 3:24 a.m. and 31 seconds in the optimum position for maximum hull stress. The Fateh-class submarine breaks in two. Both sections descend to the seafloor at 87 meters depth. The sonar picture goes from active contact to debris field in 11 seconds. The USS Pasadena holds position. Her sonar team log in the acoustic signature of structural collapse and escape in air as a record of what happened here tonight. At 3:27 a.m., the formation commander's voice comes across the net. All units, strike group. Sierra 2 is neutralized. Full ASW barrier to be maintained for 6 hours. No surface ships approach datum. Nimitz continues course alteration. We are not done with this area until it is clean. The cleanup takes 4 hours and 40 minutes. The USS Pasadena and USS Jefferson City sweep the entire approach corridor to the northwest, covering a sector from bearing 270 through 010, depth 0 to 150 meters, using a combination of active sonar, passive towed array, and sonobuoy barriers. The P-8A Poseidon drops 2 complete sonobuoy patterns on the barrier lines and makes 4 passes at low altitude with its magnetic anomaly detector, MAD, to check for any shallow contacts that might be sitting in the noise floor of the acoustic picture. The water is clean. No third contact. No additional threats. The 2 Iranian submarines were the complete operational package. At 5:47 a.m., the sector is declared sanitized. The formation commander transmits his initial report to 5th Fleet. Battle damage assessment and operational summary, submitted to CENTCOM at 7:30 a.m. Sierra 1. Kilo-class submarine Tariq, Iranian Navy, surfaced under duress in custody of USS Shoop, crew of 52 accounted for. 1 SET-65E torpedo ready in tube at time of surface, confirmed by Iranian crew statement. 2 EM-52 rocket-propelled mines aboard, not launched. Commanding officer and crew transferred to USS Nimitz under guard pending disposition instructions from National Command Authority. The Tariq is under tow to Bahrain. Sierra 2, Fateh-class submarine, Iranian Navy. Destroyed by MK-48 ADCAP torpedo attack at 3:24 a.m. Both hull sections on sea floor at 87 meters. No survivors rescued. Estimated crew of 43. Attack on USS Nimitz, 0. No weapons reached the carrier. No weapons reached any ship in the formation. 0 American casualties. The Tariq's commanding officer sits in the Nimitz's brig at 7:30 a.m. in clean dry clothes with hot coffee he did not expect to have, looking at the overhead and thinking about the 5 catastrophic mistakes that brought him here instead of the seafloor. He knows what they were. He has had 5 hours to enumerate them. He knows about the thermocline and the Jefferson City's sonar. He knows about his outdated firing solution. He does not yet know about the Fateh. He will learn about the Fateh later from the American interrogators, and that knowledge will add a 6th mistake to his list. He believed that 2 submarines were enough. In the Arabian Sea, the USS Nimitz resumes her southerly course at 14 knots. The formation is back in the standard Steeman configuration. The SH-60R helicopters have returned to their patrol intervals. The P-8A has repositioned to its standard patrol orbit. The 2 submarines are back on their barrier lines, towed arrays streaming, listening to the deep warm water. In the Combat Information Center of the USS Princeton, The watch team logs the engagement summary and begins the pre-watch briefing for the relief crew. The bearing picture is clean. The sonar picture is clean. The SIGINT picture shows elevated communications traffic from Iranian naval headquarters in Bandar Abbas. Frantic, encrypted, and unresolvable, but loud enough to tell the American signals intelligence analysts that someone in that headquarters is having a very bad morning. The Arabian Sea is open. The carrier is undamaged. The crew is safe. And somewhere on the floor of the Arabian Sea, 87 meters down, the wreckage of a submarine that made 5 catastrophic mistakes lies in 2 pieces on the sand. Attack the United States Navy, and the Navy does not sink. The Navy hunts. The Navy finds. The Navy is patient and precise, and has been doing this since before the enemy's Navy existed. The depth of the ocean is not a hiding place. It is simply a longer distance between the threat and its end. The Arabian Sea is quiet. The Nimitz sails on.